Greetings from Osceola County, Florida. Florida is a navigational anomaly. The further north you go, the more southern it gets. I hope that during this recent festival season, you were taught about the importance of wisdom. Facts can be gathered together, you have knowledge, you see how the facts relate to each other, you have understanding, then you apply your understanding, and that is wisdom, chokhmah, Sophia. In verse 5 of James 1, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. We do need to pray for wisdom. Today I want to talk about Solomon's organized wisdom. Now, it's true that we are a church, not a literary society. That's a little bit of inside humor for those of you who are fans of the musical 1776. But we are not a literary society, but we do appreciate the Bible as literature and how it's designed and put together. And Solomon's wisdom is organized in fascinating ways. I want to first go to Proverbs, the 10th chapter. And here you have from Proverbs 10:1 to Proverbs 22:16, a collection that is called the Proverbs of Solomon. And Solomon is in Hebrew Shlomo, Shin Lamed Mem Hey. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet are also numbers. Solomon's name equals 375. And in this section, there are 375 proverbs. So you have a little bit more of appreciation for how things are put together here. I do want to talk about some of these proverbs today. I want to go to the 11th chapter and the 14th verse. And here we're told, where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. So when a decision is going to be made for a group of people, it's best to have a multitude of counselors. But let's understand, you're not necessarily going to go to the most talented singer in your community to find out how to fix your car if it doesn't operate properly. So you want the counselors to be counselors who are competent in that field. And let us remember the importance of seeking advice, and seeking advice, of course, from those whose advice is of value in that particular situation. I think I can mention that as well. But it's important, especially when you have a large group, that you don't just have an autocracy, one man, one vote, in the sense that really literally one man, one vote. That is not healthy. That is not healthy because human beings, are not divine. So where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. In this same chapter, in verse 29, it's important to focus on peace within a family. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind. If you don't want to have internal strife. It's self-destructive. He who troubles his own house will inherit the wind, and the fool will be servant to the wise of heart. So it is important to be wise, and that's why we should pray to God for wisdom. In the 14th chapter is a very important principle. So important you'll see it twice. 14:12. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. I think what this proverb is telling us is that quite often we want, quote unquote, the easy way out, which is the unethical or the sinful way. And we think, maybe it's going to give us some kind of advantage. In the long run, it's self-destructive. It may seem right, but it ends in death. And that is repeated in Proverbs 16:25. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. So we need to remember that the ends do not justify the means. The means actually affect the end. If you use foul means, you're going to wind up at the end with a foul end. I'd like now to go to Proverbs 17 and verse 22. I think you'll find quite often that if comedians are not involved in self-destructive behavior, like say drug abuse, if they just live a normal life, the comedians tend to live a long time, generally. In Proverbs 17:22, a merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. So let's be in a positive frame of mind. That actually does affect our health, and for that matter, the health of those around us. Now, in Proverbs 18 and verse 24 is a beautiful proverb that can be actually understood if we study the text and the textual variants. It can be actually understood in 4 different ways that are all compatible. They don't contradict. They all, give us more information on this principle of friendship. 4 different ways. So if you check different translations, and all of you now have devices where you can, compare maybe 20 translations of a verse. So take a look at this verse in various translations. Here I read in the New King James. A man who has friends must himself be friendly, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So if you want to have friends, be a friendly person. And there are some friends that are just really valuable. That's one way to look at it. But if the same Hebrew can be understood in a different way. A social butterfly, to put it in modern language, can hurt himself. But there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. So we don't want to just be always partying around, socializing around. That you won't get a lot accomplished in other ways. But on the other hand, do appreciate proper friendship. That's another way to understand this. Now there's yet another way. There is a friend, or there is a friendship. There are friends. I'll put it that way. There are friends who can be harmful to you. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. In other words, watch who you hang out with. Watch who you hang out with, and appreciate, the ones who are really edifying. Proverbs 13:20. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. So be careful who you hang out with, because you're going to tend to reflect their behavior. The Greeks also taught this, and Paul quotes a Greek proverb in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 33. 1 Corinthians 15:33, Paul quotes this Greek wisdom. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. So that's another thing to remember about friendship. There are friends that are valuable to you and friends who are hurtful, really. And another way to understand this is there are friends just to be friendly with, sociable people that you enjoy being around them. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So some friends are just to spend time with, and they have their role to play. But there are those who are really valuable. Now, all of those meanings are tied up in Proverbs 18:24. And as I said, if you check various translations, you might see various of these meanings. But they're all compatible. They don't contradict. So I've given you some wisdom from Proverbs, from these 375, equivalent to the name Shlomo, Solomon. Now, in the book of Deuteronomy, the 31st chapter, we're told that at the end of the sabbatical year, the year of release, Shemitah, the people are to gather to hear the words of the law. So at the end of this year, this is a Shemitah year. This is a sabbatical year. So at the end of the year in Israel, people will gather in Jerusalem, and various VIPs will stand up and read out of the book of Deuteronomy. I want to go to the 12th verse of Deuteronomy 31. And here it says, gather the people together, okay? And that word, the root of it, is the same root as the word for Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. It's the same root, the root meaning to congregate, to gather. And so you see the connection between gathering and people to hear the law and the Festival of Tabernacles. And the book of Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, is read by the Jews during the Feast of Tabernacles, and it is attributed to Solomon. I want to go to 1 Kings, the 8th chapter. During the fall festival season, we have the dedication of the first temple, and in 1 Kings 8, I've turned to 2 Kings, so let's go back to 1 Kings. In 1 Kings 8, we see again that term, and this case associated with Solomon. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, and all the heads of the tribes, the chief fathers of the children of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Eternal from the city of David, which is Zion. So he assembled the people, and he is the assembler, the convener. He is Kohelet. The book of Ecclesiastes is the book of Kohelet, the convener or the assembler. And in English we call it, from a Greek term, Ecclesiastes. Now, if you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, the 11th chapter, and the 2nd verse, I want to go to Ecclesiastes 11 and verse 2. It says, give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. So this implies the Festival of Tabernacles and the 8th day of Sacred Assembly. When the Festival of Tabernacles begins on a Shabbat, on a Sabbath, a weekly Sabbath, normally the Jews will read the book of Ecclesiastes on the 8th day of Sacred Assembly, on the final Sabbath of that season. So it's read normally on the Sabbath during the Festival of Tabernacles. But if it begins on the Sabbath, then it's normally read on the 8th day of Sacred Assembly on the Sabbath. And that way you have the opportunity to keep the Feast of Tabernacles, which will enhance your appreciation of the book. Now, the book of Kohelet, we struggle with why Kohelet has a feminine form. And one commentary I read discounted this theory, but I think there are others who hold it. That the book of Proverbs talks about wisdom, chokhmah, and wisdom is in Hebrew grammatically is a feminine term. So wisdom is pictured as a female in Proverbs 8. Wisdom is pictured as a woman. And in a way you have the same thing in Greek with Sophia. Sophia is a common name nowadays. Well, it used to be more common maybe than it is now. Names come and go. But wisdom is pictured as feminine. So Kohelet, Solomon, in a way, is the personification of wisdom as he gives this preaching in Ecclesiastes 12. So that would be one explanation why Kohelet is feminine. As I said, not everybody agrees with that idea, so I'm not going to present it in a dogmatic fashion. But when we look at the book of Kohelet, the book of Ecclesiastes, it is organized in numerical fashion. And I wanted to bring that to your attention. Sometimes I review that. The concept of the book, of course, is that life is temporal, it's ephemeral, it comes and goes like so much vapor. It is hevel, vanity. It is hevel havalim, vanity of vanities. And in the first verse, or second verse of Ecclesiastes, you have hevel havalim. You have vanity of vanities. Hevel havalim, hakol hevel. Hevel havalim, hakol hevel. So, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So, in a sense, you have vanity 3 times. Hevel havalim, hakol hevel. That's the statement. And so you have vanity, vanity, vanity. Hevel, hevel, hevel. Hevel in Hebrew numerically is 37. And here it's repeated 3 times. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. at the end of that verse. 37 times 3 is 111. The Book of Ecclesiastes, in one sense, is divided into two sections of 111 verses each, 222 verses in all. And the 111th part ends the first half, and you find that in Ecclesiastes 6 and verse 8. Verse 9. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of desire. This also is vanity and grasping for the wind. And so that ended the first half of the book. Then you have 111 more verses. So that's one way to look at it. But also, if you take the statement, Hevel havalim hakol hevel, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, that numerically is equal to 216. And this book, in a sense, has 216 verses. And then when you come to verse 216, it concludes in verse 8 of chapter 12, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Then you have an appendix of 6 verses, which, summarizes what we're supposed to get out of the book. So you have a book of 216 verses, and then you have this special appendix at the end. So you see how it's organized in a numerical way. So I want to now cover some highlights from the book, and I thought what I would do is go to the final chapter, Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter. Now, if you followed our Festival of Tabernacles services on the Flare channel, you would have heard Daniel, my son, reading from a modern translation through the entire book on the Sabbath during the Festival of Tabernacles. I want to mention that this is a sabbatical year. This is a Shemitah year. Normally, in Flare, we read through the Gospels and Acts in the course of a year, the New Testament Pentateuch. But this year, we're reading through the Pentateuch of the Old Testament, the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, and we're reading through according to the Parashah, the Sidra, the portion of each week, each Sabbath, and we're going through and dividing it up into 7 parts as when the Jews read it publicly. So all through the week, there's little sections where Daniel will read from the Torah, and then he and I will discuss that particular segment. That's going to be an ongoing project all through the year on the Flare channel. Along with that, we'll be reading the epistles, the 21 epistles through the course of the year. That'll be our equivalent of the Haftarah reading. The Jews read from the law and the prophets. We'll be reading from the law and the epistles. So I thought I might mention that to you. And I'm grateful for your interest in these messages, which, God willing, I hope to continue over for many years to come, God willing. I want to go to Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. So it's much better, to get into proper habits in your younger days, rather than having to learn from the school of hard luck. And here there's beautiful literature here showing what happens as we begin to break down physically, when life begins to get more difficult as we get older. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men bow down, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look through the windows grow dim. And then you can see analogies here to the human body and how we begin to deteriorate as we get older. When the doors are shut in the streets, and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird, and all the daughters of music are brought low. Also they are afraid of height, and of terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper is a burden. I wonder if that has to do with your hair getting whiter. And the grasshopper is a burden, and it's difficult to move around. And desire fails, for man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. as the saying goes, you're dead a long time. Of course, we do understand from other verses, that there is a resurrection. That's a clear teaching in the Bible. And we understand from the Book of Ecclesiastes that each of us is accountable for the way we live. That's quite clear in the book, and we'll see that in a moment here as I keep reading. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher shattered at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the well. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. So there is a spirit component to human beings. There is a spirit component, and we should appreciate that. But when the man dies, that power returns to God, so the man is no longer conscious. The spirit is no longer being utilized. But God does have the power. Omnipotent God has the power to bring us back after we have died. And that is a promise throughout the scriptures, Old and New Testament. Techiyat hametim, giving life to the dead, resurrecting the dead. Anastasia. And yet we conclude here, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, Kohelet, all is vanity. So, there's nothing you really take out of this life other than the character that you build. So that's really all that matters. And so we have this appendix to clarify what Solomon has to say here. Evidently, at the end of his life, he realized, he'd blown it. He had been so wise, but he evidently he thought he was an exception to the rule. He said a lot of wonderful things and did a lot of wonderful things initially, but as he got older, he seemed to think that he was an exception to the rule, and he didn't want to do what Deuteronomy 17 warns the king, about, unfortunately, and it caused the division of the kingdom after his death. So towards the end of his life, it would seem that he repented finally. It was too late it was maybe not too late for him in terms of his own future, but it was too late for the future of that kingdom. It split after his death. And anyway, here's some comments now at the end of the Book of Kohelet. And I want to mention, last night, as I said, we were reading through the epistles and began in Romans 1 and 2. And Romans 2 is very fascinating because it does show something that we understand, many of us. Human beings were created in the image of God. And human beings, for example, have a sense of what is beautiful and what is ugly. And human beings also have a sense of what is right and what is wrong. It's innate. It's part of our humanity. Now, it can be perverted. It can be distorted. It needs nurturing. And so in a civilized society which is interested in self-preservation, the positive side is going to be supported and enhanced, and the negative side will be suppressed and, if necessary, punished. Because we are, unfortunately, as human beings, fallible and subject, unfortunately, to evil. And this is part of the way we are. It's not entirely our fault. We can go into that another time. There is a spirit influence negatively here, but also God has shown us a positive influence in the Bible. But civilization itself understands, if the leaders are wise, that human beings are prone to misbehave. And so, as I said, a civilization which is not self-destructive, which wants to preserve itself and which wants to enhance itself and make progress, will, in its citizenry, will instill positive behavior, will educate its citizens in that regard, and will discourage negative behavior and, if necessary, punish it. But anyway, so in Romans 2 and verse 13, Well, let's go back to verse 11 of Romans 2, talking about Jews and Gentiles. For there's no partiality with God, for as many as have sinned without law will also perish without law, and as many have sinned in the law will be judged by the law. The Jews had the advantage of a code, which revealed to them clearly what's right and wrong. But Gentiles were also born with a conscience. They had their philosophers and their leaders who taught them about certain basic morality, and they were responsible for that, and are now. For not the hearers of the law are just in the sight of God, but the doers of the law will be justified. This is Romans 2:13. For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves, who show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or else excusing them, in the day when God will judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. As it says in Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed for men once to die, and after that the judgment. So all of us are writing a record in this life that we're going to be accountable for, and we understand that there's coming a period of judgment when the dead will be resurrected and will be judged, and evidently they'll have the opportunity to repent and then prove by living for a period of time God's way that is indeed the way to which they are committed. And after that, they have the opportunity to be resurrected to immortal life. On the other hand, those who are part of God's church are now being judged. They have made the commitment, and for us, for us it's now or never. We have the opportunity to be the first fruits, to be resurrected to immortal life at the second coming of Christ. And I want to turn to Mark, the 4th chapter, and verse 22. Mark 4 and verse 22. I guess I want verse... yes, I'm right. I just... sometimes you're too clever by half. I had the right verse. Mark 4:22. For there is nothing hidden which will not be revealed, nor has anything been kept secret, but that it should come to light. Well, in this high-tech age, we're painfully aware of that anyway. Even if we didn't consider the supernatural, if we didn't consider the spirit realm, which is real, but even nowadays in the physical realm with high tech, privacy is becoming a thing of the past. Anyway, we all know that we are going to be accountable one way or the other, and the Book of Ecclesiastes concludes this way. And in verse 9, and moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. It is one God who inspired this whole collection of books from which I read from week to week. And further, my son, be admonished by these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. This is all of man. Kizeh kol ha'adam. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And so that is a major lesson we're supposed to learn from the autumn festival season. As you read in Deuteronomy 14, we're supposed to learn from all of that to fear God. And fear is the reverence for God is the emotion that causes us to obey. And we want to obey because it's really the best for us and best for everybody else. Matthew 6 and verse 33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Eternity. and the rule of the universe under God will be added to us if we seek first his kingdom. So I've shared with you today some of Solomon's organized wisdom. All the best to you and yours.